He brought his mistress to the gala, planning to parade her in front of the world. The last person he expected to see was his ex-wife, the plain, quiet woman he'd discarded 2 years ago. He thought she would be at home, a forgotten memory in his glamorous new life. But when the ballroom doors swung open, a collective gasp silenced the room. The woman who entered wasn't the one he remembered. She moved with the grace of a supermodel, radiating a power that made everyone, including him, stop and stare. He was about to learn a devastating lesson. While he was focused on his image, she was busy building an empire. Before we get started, drop your city in the comments. It's always amazing to see where everyone's watching from across the globe. Let's jump in. Isabel "Izzy" Sinclair existed in the quiet, respectable spaces of New York City. At 36, she was the senior editor at Blackwood Press, a niche publishing house that championed forgotten classics and bold new voices. Her life was a study in muted tones, charcoal gray turtlenecks, sensible loafers, and a tidy bun that kept her light brown hair from her face as she bent over manuscripts. Her colleagues respected her sharp intellect and ferocious work ethic, but she moved through the office like a phantom. Her presence felt more in her incisive editorial notes than in her physical being. She was, by all accounts, a woman of substance, but she had long forgotten how to take up space. Her apartment, a cozy pre-war 2-bedroom she now shared with her best friend, was her sanctuary. It was filled with books stacked floor to ceiling, the scent of old paper and freshly brewed tea, and the quiet hum of a city she observed from a safe distance. It was a life she had carefully, painstakingly rebuilt from the ashes of another. That other life belonged to Nathaniel Pierce. Nathaniel Pierce, 42, was not a quiet man. As the CEO of the formidable hedge fund Pierce Capital, he was a creature of the spotlight, a titan of Wall Street with a wolf's smile and a tailor who deserved a knighthood. His world was one of glass-walled boardrooms, exclusive tables at Le Coucou, and a carefully curated public image that screamed power and success. He was polished, arrogant, and collected beautiful things, art, watches, and for 12 years a wife who made him look grounded and intellectual. Izzy had been that wife. She had been his anchor, the quiet intelligence that tempered his brash ambition. She'd hosted his dinners, edited his speeches, and stood by his side at countless galas, a soft-spoken counterpoint to his booming charisma. She had loved him with the fierce, unassuming loyalty of a woman who believed in the vows they had taken. The end had not been quiet. It had been a citywide scandal, splashed across the digital pages of every gossip column. Nathaniel had been caught, not just cheating, but engaging in a sordid, flagrant affair with Vanessa Clark. At 29, Vanessa was everything Izzy wasn't, a high-profile influencer whose entire life was a performance for her millions of followers. She was a brand ambassador for luxury lifestyles, a woman who didn't just wear designer clothes but became them. The paparazzi photos had been brutal. Nathaniel and Vanessa, entwined on a yacht in St. Bart's, laughing, glistening in the sun while Izzy was back in New York, nursing a case of pneumonia she'd been too busy to properly treat because of a deadline at work. The divorce was swift and clinical. Nathaniel, obsessed with image, spun a narrative of growing apart, of irreconcilable differences. He painted Izzy as a work-obsessed homebody who couldn't keep up with his dynamic world. He was generous with the settlement. Guilt money, she knew, but he was surgical in his emotional detachment. He excised her from his life as cleanly as a tumor, leaving behind a phantom limb of a marriage that ached every time the weather changed. For 2 years, Izzy had dedicated herself to healing in the only way she knew how, through work and silence. She buried her grief in the slush pile, found solace in the red ink of her pen, and slowly, painstakingly, learned to sleep through the night in a bed that felt cavernously empty. She had become unremarkable by design, a deliberate retreat from a world that had judged her, pitied her, and then promptly forgotten her. She preferred it that way. In the quiet, no one could hurt her. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday, nestled between a manuscript and a bill from the electrician. It was thick, cream-colored cardstock, the kind that felt important even before you read the words. The engraving was a deep, majestic navy blue. The board of directors of the Hamilton Meyer Foundation cordially invites you to the annual charity gala at the Plaza Hotel. Izzy's breath caught in her throat. The Hamilton Meyer Gala. It was the crown jewel of the New York social season, an event she and Nathaniel had attended every year of their marriage. She could picture it instantly, the grand ballroom dripping with crystal chandeliers, the scent of 1,000 lilies, the murmur of the city's elite. It was the stage upon which their marriage had been performed. Her first instinct was a visceral, full-body rejection. No. Her hand hovered over the wastebasket. Attending would be like deliberately walking into a haunted house. Every corner held a memory. Nathaniel charming a senator by the champagne fountain, the two of them sharing a stolen dance on the terrace, the city lights a glittering tapestry below. The weight of his hand on the small of her back, a gesture that felt like possession more than affection. She was about to tear it in half when a flicker of something, curiosity, morbid fascination, made her pause. Why had she been invited? The foundation's chairwoman, a formidable woman named Eleanor Vance, had always been kind to her, but invitations to their shared past had stopped arriving months after the divorce. This felt intentional. She placed the card on her kitchen counter, a silent, ticking bomb in the peaceful quiet of her evening. The bomb detonated an hour later when Tariq Delaney swept into the apartment, a whirlwind of emerald green silk and righteous indignation. Tariq, her best friend and now roommate, was a fashion designer who had just returned from a 3-year stint in Paris, working for a legendary couture house. He was flamboyant, brilliant, and fiercely loyal, the vibrant color to Izzy's muted palette. "Izzy, darling, you will not believe the audacity of the fabric supplier on 7th Avenue. He tried to sell me a polyester blend and call it charmeuse. The nerve!" He dropped his portfolio on the table, then stopped dead, his eyes zeroing in on the invitation. He snatched it up, his perfectly sculpted eyebrows arching into his hairline. "Well, well, well," he purred, reading it aloud. "A ghost from Gala's past." "I'm throwing it away," Izzy said quickly, reaching for it. Tariq held it out of reach, his expression shifting from theatrical to serious. "No, you're not." "Tariq, please. You know what that night is. It was our night. His night." The words felt like ash in her mouth. "Precisely," Tariq said, his dark eyes intense. "Which is why you must go." "Why? So I can stand in a corner and watch him parade Vanessa around? So I can have 100 people look at me with pity? No, thank you. I'll take a night in with a proof copy of a dissertation on Byzantine poetry, thanks." Tariq sighed, leaning against the counter. He knew the landscape of her pain better than anyone. He had been the one to pack her bags, to field the calls from her weeping mother, to sit with her in silence when the words wouldn't come. "Sweetheart, listen to me," he said, his voice softening. "I saw on page 6 this morning, Nathaniel is one of the co-chairs this year. He's attending with Vanessa. It's supposed to be her official debut into his world. The press is eating it up." Izzy flinched, the news a physical blow. Of course, Nathaniel wasn't just attending, he was reigning over it. He was formally installing his new queen in the very castle where Izzy had once resided. The cruelty was so like him, so public, so performative. "That's even more reason not to go," she whispered. "No," Tariq said, his voice ringing with conviction. "That is the only reason to go. This isn't about him, Izzy. This isn't about revenge. Revenge is tacky and it gives you wrinkles. This is about reclamation. For 12 years, you were Mrs. Pierce. You stood in his shadow, elegant and intelligent and completely overlooked. He created a narrative that you were the boring little mouse who couldn't keep up. If you don't go, You let that story stand as the final word. You let him win. He stepped closer, taking her hands in his. You go for yourself. You walk into that ballroom not as the discarded wife, but as Isabel Sinclair, editor, intellectual, a woman who survived. You don't have to say a word to him. Your presence alone, standing tall, will be enough. You will reclaim your story. Tears welled in Izzy's eyes. He wasn't just talking about a party. He was talking about her life. The narrative Nathaniel had spun had seeped into her own self-perception. Had she become the plain, unremarkable woman because he had told her she was? I don't have anything to wear, she said, the excuse flimsy even to her own ears. A slow, brilliant smile spread across Tariq's face. The artist in him was ignited. Darling, he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Leave that to me. We're not going to give them a new character. We're going to show them the one they were too blind to see all along. Izzy looked from the invitation to the fire in her best friend's eyes. The fear was still there, a cold knot in her stomach. But beneath it, a tiny, unfamiliar ember began to glow. The thought of facing Nathaniel was terrifying, but the thought of letting him define her for the rest of her life was, she realized, even more so. Okay, she breathed, the words small but solid. Okay, I'll go. Tariq's idea of a transformation had nothing to do with gimmicks or disguises. This is not a revenge dress, Izzy, he declared a week later, surrounded by sketches and fabric swatches in his sun-drenched studio. The revenge dress is loud. It screams, "Look what you're missing!" We are not screaming. We are speaking, in a clear, unwavering voice. His vision was an act of collaboration, a slow excavation of the woman buried beneath years of self-effacement. He didn't want to turn Izzy into someone else. He wanted to dress the person she already was. He spent hours talking to her, not about fashion, but about her work, her passions, her rediscovered dreams. He made her read her own poetry aloud, something she hadn't done for anyone in a decade. It was hesitant at first, her voice a fragile whisper, but as she read, a quiet strength emerged. The process extended beyond the studio. At Tariq's gentle but firm insistence, Izzy started therapy. Her therapist, a warm, perceptive woman named Dr. Anya Sharma, helped her unpack the architecture of her marriage. It wasn't a simple story of a man who cheated. It was a slow, insidious erosion of self. Flashbacks, once hazy and painful, now came into sharp, clinical focus. She remembered a dinner party early in their marriage. She'd been passionately discussing a new novel with a guest, her face animated, her hands gesturing. Nathaniel had walked over, placed a hand on her shoulder, and said with a chuckle to the table, "My Izzy, so serious. She gets lost in her little books." The table laughed with him. The conversation shifted. She had fallen silent, the light in her snuffed out. She recalled the time she was offered a promotion to a senior role at a major publishing house, a dream job. Nathaniel had been subtly discouraging. "But darling, the hours would be brutal. We'd never see each other. And my work is so demanding right now. I need you. Besides, your little press is so charming." He had framed his control as concern, his selfishness as a need for her. She had turned down the job, convincing herself it was the right decision for them. He had curated her life, her friendships, even her thoughts. Her plainness had been a cage he'd built around her, bar by gilded bar. He'd praised her for being not like other women, meaning not a threat, not ambitious, not loud. The therapy sessions were grueling, forcing her to confront the ways she had been complicit in her own diminishment, accepting his definition of her as truth. "He didn't break you, Isabel," Dr. Sharma told her one afternoon. "He convinced you that you were already broken. Your work now is to realize you were always whole." The internal work began to manifest externally. She started running in the mornings, not to lose weight, but to feel the strength in her legs, the rhythm of her own heart. She wore her hair down at the office. the soft waves framing a face that was beginning to lose its perpetual look of apology. She spoke up more in editorial meetings, her insights sharper, her voice more confident. She was reconnecting with herself, and the world was beginning to notice. Meanwhile, in Tariq's studio, the dress took shape. It was not black, the color of mourning, nor red, the color of vengeance. It was a deep, complex shade of sapphire blue, the color of a twilight sky. The fabric was a heavy silk crepe that moved like liquid. The design was deceptively simple, a high neckline that framed her clavicle, long sleeves, and a column silhouette that draped over her body rather than clinging to it. Its only drama was the back, which was cut low in a graceful, surprising V, and a slit that rose to her knee, hinting at movement and freedom. "It's designed to draw the eye to your face," Tariq explained, pinning the hem. "To your carriage. It says you have nothing to hide and nothing to prove. It's the armor of a woman who is her own fortress." When Izzy tried on the final version, she didn't see a stranger in the mirror. She saw herself, finally in focus. The transformation was taking root in her professional life as well. A manuscript had landed on her desk that electrified her. It was a memoir by Dr. Lena Rosenthal, a brilliant and controversial young feminist historian. Titled The Unmaking, it was a raw, unflinching account of her journey of leaving academia to reclaim her own voice from an institution she found suffocating and patriarchal. It was daring, unapologetic, and mirrored Izzy's own awakening in ways that felt like kismet. Izzy knew it was a risk for Blackwood Press. It was more commercial, more confrontational than their usual fare. But she felt a fire in her belly she hadn't felt in years. She worked for days on her pitch, crafting a proposal that was not just about the book, but about the cultural moment it represented. The editorial board meeting was tense. The older, more traditional editors were skeptical. "It's too aggressive," one said. "Our readers expect literary fiction, not polemics." The old Izzy would have conceded. But this Izzy stood her ground. "Polemics change the world," she argued, her voice clear and steady. And Lena Rosenthal isn't just writing a polemic. She's writing a masterpiece of personal narrative. This book will not just be read. It will be a lifeline for women who have been told to be quieter, smaller, more accommodating. It's a book I wish I'd had 10 years ago. We need to publish it. Her passion, backed by meticulous research on market trends and a powerful sample chapter, won them over. She got the green light. The phone call to Dr. Rosenthal was one of the proudest moments of her life. Around the same time, the letters began to arrive. They came to her office, addressed in elegant, slanted handwriting on simple, high-quality linen paper. There was no return address. The first one was short. "Ms. Sinclair, I have long admired your editorial choices at Blackwood. Your championing of the translated works of Anna Merrick was a masterstroke. You have an eye for the quiet voices that carry the most weight. A rare and valuable gift. A well-wisher." Izzy was intrigued. The second letter arrived a week later, after the news of the Dr. Rosenthal acquisition was announced in Publishers Weekly. "Ms. Sinclair, Dr. Rosenthal. A brave and necessary choice. A book that will surely start a fire. It seems your eye is not just for the quiet voices, but for the ones that are about to roar. The world needs more editors like you, curators of courage. Your admirer." The letters were a balm. In a world that had so often overlooked her professional contributions, here was someone who saw her, who understood the nuances of her work. The handwriting was masculine, the prose intelligent and measured. She had no idea who it could be, but the anonymous validation felt like a secret source of strength. She tucked the letters into her desk drawer, a private treasure. One evening, Tariq found her rereading them. "Secret lover?" he teased. "Secret admirer of my work," she corrected, smiling. "It's nice to feel seen." "Darling," Tariq said, draping a protective cloth over the nearly finished sapphire gown. "Everyone is about to see you." The night of the gala was 2 days away. For the first time, Izzy didn't feel dread. She felt a quiet, simmering anticipation. She wasn't walking into a haunted house. She was walking into her future. The air outside the Plaza Hotel was a chaotic symphony of New York at its most glamorous. The blare of car horns mixed with the staccato clicks of 100 cameras and the excited chatter of onlookers held back by velvet ropes. Limousines, sleek and black as obsidian, deposited their glittering cargo onto the red carpet. It was a river of silk, diamonds, and ambition flowing into the grand entrance. Izzy felt a tremor of her old fear as their car pulled up. The sheer scale of it was overwhelming. Tariq, sitting beside her in a stunning velvet tuxedo of his own design, squeezed her hand. "Breathe," he murmured. "You are not a guest at this party. You are the event." She took a breath, closed her eyes for a second, and centered herself. She wasn't the timid woman who used to cling to Nathaniel's arm. She was Isabel Sinclair. She had published brave books. She had survived. She had a voice. When the car door opened, she did not hesitate. She emerged from the town car with a fluid grace she didn't know she possessed. The night air was cool against her skin. The sapphire blue of her gown seemed to drink in the flashing lights, glowing with an inner luminescence. It was, as Tariq had intended, breathtakingly simple. It made no loud demands for attention, yet it commanded it utterly. Her hair was styled in soft, elegant waves that fell over one shoulder, and her makeup was minimal, accentuating the clarity of her eyes and the gentle curve of her mouth. She wore no necklace, leaving her throat and collarbones bare, a statement of quiet confidence. Her only jewelry was a pair of delicate diamond and sapphire earrings, a gift from Tariq that glittered like captured stars. A few photographers, likely expecting another influencer in a barely-there dress, turned their lenses on her out of reflex. Then they paused. A murmur went through the press line. "Who is that?" Someone recognized her. "Wait, is that Nathaniel Pierce's ex-wife?" The murmur grew louder, more insistent. The clicks of the cameras became a frantic, hungry roar. They weren't taking pictures of a socialite's discarded accessory. They were capturing a revelation. Izzy did not pose. She simply walked, her posture perfect, her expression serene. She offered a small, calm smile to the throng and moved towards the entrance. She felt their gazes on her, but for the first time, they felt not like judgments, but like questions, and she was the only one with the answer. Inside the grand ballroom, the effect was magnified. The room was a glittering universe of the city's most powerful people. Heads turned, conversations faltered. People who had known her for years looked at her as if seeing her for the first time. They saw not a plain woman, but one who possessed a rare and potent combination: elegance and intelligence, grace and strength. And then she saw him. Nathaniel was holding court near the main bar, a glass of champagne in his hand, Vanessa clinging to his arm. Vanessa was a vision in fire engine red sequins, a dress designed to scream for attention. It was low-cut, high-slit, and left nothing to the imagination. She was laughing loudly at something Nathaniel had said, her head thrown back. One of Nathaniel's associates saw Izzy first. His eyes widened, and he nudged his boss. Nathaniel turned, a practiced, charming smile on his face, ready to greet another guest. The smile froze, then dissolved completely. It was as if someone had pulled the plug on his entire universe. He just stared, his champagne glass held halfway to his lips. He saw the sapphire dress, the confident posture, the serene face. This was not the mousy, heartbroken woman he had left. This was a stranger. A magnificent, terrifying stranger who wore his ex-wife's face. Vanessa, sensing the shift in his attention, followed his gaze. Her own smile tightened, a flash of pure, unadulterated venom in her eyes. She saw a threat she hadn't anticipated. She had prepared for a ghost, a pitiful figure she could easily dismiss. She had not prepared for this. She recovered first, pulling on Nathaniel's arm. "Darling, let's go say hello," she said, her voice dripping with saccharine sweetness. She steered him towards Izzy, like a ship captain navigating treacherous waters. "Isabel!" Vanessa purred as they approached, her eyes sweeping over Izzy's gown with feigned admiration. "You look so lovely. It's wonderful that you felt comfortable enough to come." The passive-aggressive barb was perfectly delivered. "You look nice for you. How brave of you to show your face here." The old Izzy would have stammered, mumbled a thank you, and fled. The new Izzy met her gaze with a calm, unwavering look. "Vanessa," she said, her voice warm and even. "It's a beautiful evening. The Foundation does such important work." She offered no compliment in return, no acknowledgement of the jab. She simply deflected, her poise a shield that Vanessa's pettiness couldn't penetrate. She then turned her eyes to Nathaniel, who was still struggling to find his footing. "Nathaniel," she said, a simple, polite acknowledgement. She gave him nothing. Not anger, not sadness, not longing. Just the cool, distant courtesy one might afford a former colleague. The lack of emotional reaction rattled him more than any outburst could have. He had expected tears or bitterness, something he could control or dismiss. He was met with indifference. It was like punching a cloud. "Izzy," he finally managed, his voice strained. "You look different." "I'm not," she replied with a small, knowing smile. "You're just seeing me more clearly now." And with a polite nod, she turned and walked away, leaving them standing in her wake. The spotlight they had so carefully cultivated now dimmed by her quiet, luminous presence. Izzy found her table, and her breath caught again, this time in surprise. She hadn't been relegated to a social Siberia in the back of the ballroom. Her seat was at a prime table near the stage, populated by a fascinating mix of power players. There was a state senator, the editor-in-chief of the New Yorker, and, to her astonishment, the revered author Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, whose work she deeply admired. Eleanor Vance, the Foundation chairwoman, had seated her with intent. This was not an act of pity. It was an act of endorsement. And then she saw the final place card, Sebastian Quinn. Her heart gave a little jolt. Sebastian Quinn was a legend in the journalism world, a Pulitzer Prize winner for his investigative work on international conflicts. His long-form essays were required reading, his prose both lyrical and devastating. He was also notoriously private, rarely making public appearances. A few minutes later, he arrived. He was tall and lean, with kind eyes that held a hint of weariness, as if he'd seen too much of the world. He had salt and pepper hair and a face that was more interesting than handsome. He moved with the same quiet confidence that Izzy was just beginning to inhabit. He took his seat beside her and offered a warm, genuine smile. "Sebastian Quinn," he said, his voice a low, pleasant baritone. "Isabel Sinclair," she replied. "It's an honor. I'm a great admirer of your work." "The honor is all mine, Miss Sinclair," he said, his eyes twinkling. "I'm a great admirer of yours as well." Izzy's mind raced. He was the one? The slanted handwriting, the intelligent prose, the appreciation for the quiet voices. It all clicked into place. "The letters," she breathed, her cheeks flushing slightly. He nodded, a hint of a blush on his own cheeks. "I hope they weren't an intrusion. I've followed your career at Blackwood for some time. Your decision to publish Dr. Rosenthal was inspired. I wanted to tell you so." Across the ballroom, Nathaniel watched them. He saw Izzy laughing, her face animated as she talked with the Pulitzer winner. He saw the way Sebastian Quinn leaned in, listening intently. He saw the editor of The New Yorker engage her in a deep conversation. The narrative he had so carefully constructed, of his plain, uninteresting, socially awkward ex-wife, was not just crumbling. It was being publicly dismantled and exposed as a lie. He was rattled, his polished veneer cracking under the weight of a reality he could not control. Vanessa's incessant chatter beside him faded into an irritating buzz. For the first time in a long time, Nathaniel Pierce felt irrelevant. After the main course, Eleanor Vance took the stage to introduce the evening's keynote speaker. This is a man whose work reminds us of the power of the written word to bear witness, to seek truth, and to give voice to the voiceless, she began. It is my great pleasure to introduce Mr. Sebastian Quinn. A wave of applause went through the room. Izzy looked at Sebastian in shock. He gave her a small apologetic smile as if to say, "Sorry for the surprise." He walked to the podium and began his speech. He spoke of courage, of the importance of narratives in shaping our world. And then he did something unexpected. "We often think of courage in terms of grand gestures," he said, his gaze sweeping the room. "Soldiers on a battlefield, journalists in a war zone. But there is another kind of courage, the quiet, intellectual courage to champion stories that challenge us, that force us to see the world differently. It's the courage of an editor who, in a world of commercial noise, chooses to publish a voice that is difficult but necessary." He paused, and his eyes found Izzy's. "There is an editor in this room tonight, Isabel Sinclair of Blackwood Press, who recently acquired the memoir of Dr. Lena Rosenthal. It is a fierce, raw, and vital book. By championing that work, Miss Sinclair is not just shaping a book. She is helping to reshape our cultural landscape. That is an act of profound courage, and it deserves our recognition." A spotlight, soft but deliberate, found Izzy at her table. A wave of applause, genuine and warm, rippled through the ballroom. For a moment, she was frozen, the public praise more stunning than any insult could ever be. Then she felt Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie's hand on her arm, giving it a supportive squeeze. She smiled, a real, radiant smile, and gave a small nod of acknowledgement. In that moment, the power shift was complete. She was no longer Nathaniel Pierce's ex-wife. She was Isabel Sinclair, a force in her own right, publicly lauded by one of the most respected writers in the world. Nathaniel could only watch, his face a mask of disbelief and dawning horror. He had wanted to show her what she had lost. Instead, in front of all of New York, she had just shown him what he had been too blind to see. The applause for Sebastian's speech was a death knell for Vanessa Clark's evening. She had come to the gala to be anointed, to cement her status as the new Mrs. Power and Influence. Instead, she had been rendered a footnote, a garish splash of red in a room suddenly captivated by a quiet study in blue. Sebastian's praise of Izzy wasn't just a compliment. It was a public transfer of value. The spotlight had swiveled, and it had left her in the cold. Her insecurity, always simmering beneath the surface of her curated confidence, began to boil over. She watched Izzy accept congratulations from a stream of literary agents, politicians, and even a cameo-making Christian Siriano, who complimented Tariq's design with a knowing eye. Every smile directed at Izzy was a slight to her. "Can you believe that?" she hissed at Nathaniel, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "He turned his whole keynote into an advertisement for your boring ex-wife." "Keep your voice down, Vanessa," Nathaniel muttered, his eyes still fixed on Izzy's table. He was a strategist, and he was trying to calculate his next move, but his mind was blank. All his assets, his money, his charm, his status, seemed worthless against Izzy's newfound intangible power. "Don't you tell me to keep my voice down?" Vanessa snapped, her carefully constructed poise shattering. A few people at nearby tables turned to look. "I have spent 6 months building a brand with you, the power couple. I've endured your moods, your obsession with appearances, your condescending little remarks. For what? To be publicly humiliated while everyone fawns over Saint Isabel and her courage." The scene was escalating. Vanessa, a creature of the digital realm, was used to controlling her own narrative with filters and captions. In the raw, unedited space of the real world, she was flailing. "This is exactly what you did to her, isn't it?" she accused, her voice rising in pitch. "You made her feel small so you could feel big. You told her she wasn't interesting enough, that her work didn't matter. Well, guess what, Nathaniel? The Pulitzer Prize winner seems to disagree." Nathaniel grabbed her arm, his face turning a dangerous shade of red. "That's enough," he said through gritted teeth. Vanessa wrenched her arm away. The veneer was gone completely, replaced by a raw, bitter fury. "No, it's not enough. You want to talk about narratives? Here's a good one. The story of how Nathaniel Pierce's fund is underperforming, and he's been using my influencer contacts to court new, younger investors from the tech world because his old money connections are drying up." A collective gasp went through their section of the ballroom. It was a direct hit, a betrayal that went beyond the personal to the professional. In Nathaniel's world, the perception of weakness was a fatal wound. Vanessa wasn't done. Realizing she'd crossed a point of no return, she decided to burn the entire bridge. "You think I did this for love?" She laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "This was a PR strategy, you arrogant fool, a mutually beneficial partnership. And you know all those little inside stories that have been leaking to the tabloids about your oh-so-dramatic life? The ones that kept our names in the headlines?" She leaned in, her smile a cruel slash of red lipstick. "You're welcome." With that, she turned on her heel and stormed out of the ballroom, leaving a trail of stunned silence and shattered reputations in her wake. Nathaniel stood alone, exposed and humiliated. The whispers started immediately. People who had been clapping him on the back an hour earlier now avoided his gaze, turning away to speak in hushed tones. His polished image, the construct he had spent a lifetime building, had been cracked open by a woman in a red sequin dress, all because of the quiet power of a woman in blue. A week after the gala, the fallout was still settling. Vanessa Clark, ever the savvy brand strategist, had already spun the story into one of female empowerment, giving an exclusive interview about escaping a toxic, controlling relationship. She conveniently left out her own machinations, of course, but the damage to Nathaniel was done. Whispers about his fund's instability grew louder. Several key investors pulled out. Izzy, meanwhile, was riding a wave of quiet triumph. Her office was flooded with flowers and congratulatory notes. Dr. Rosenthal's manuscript was being fast-tracked, and a bidding war had erupted for the film rights. Tariq's sapphire gown was the talk of the fashion blogs, and he was fielding calls from Anna Wintour's office. One rainy Thursday evening, her doorman buzzed. "Miss Sinclair, there's a Mr. Pierce here to see you." Izzy's heart did a familiar, nervous flutter, an echo of a past self. But it was followed by a wave of calm. "Send him up," she said. She was not afraid. When she opened the door, she saw a man she barely recognized. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a desperate, haggard look. He was still impeccably dressed, but his suit seemed to hang off him. "Izzy," he said, his voice raw. "Can I come in?" She stepped aside, gesturing him into the living room. It was the first time he had been in her new apartment. He looked around at the towering shelves of books, the comfortable lived-in furniture, the sketches for Tariq's new collection tacked to a corkboard. It was a world that was entirely hers. "You've been busy," he said, a weak attempt at a joke. "I have," she said simply, remaining standing. She was not going to make this comfortable for him. He finally turned to face her, his eyes pleading. "I saw you at the gala. Izzy, I was wrong. About everything. I let something real and good slip away for something cheap and hollow. Vanessa, the business, all of it. It's all just noise." He took a step closer. "I miss you. I miss this." He gestured around the room, as if to encompass her entire life. The quiet. The intelligence. The realness. I miss the real thing. It was a perfect speech, calibrated for maximum effect. The old Izzy would have wept. She would have seen a flicker of the man she once loved, a man who was finally admitting his mistakes. But the new Izzy heard what he wasn't saying. He wasn't saying, "I miss who you are." He was saying, "I miss what you provided for me." Stability. An intellectual anchor. A quiet backdrop for his loud life. He had come back not because she had changed, but because his other options had imploded. She looked at him, her gaze clear and steady. The final piece of his power over her dissolved in that moment. "No, Nathaniel," she said, her voice soft but unshakable. "You don't miss me." He looked confused. "Of course I do." "You miss the way I made you feel," she clarified. "You miss the way I made you look. You miss having a woman by your side who didn't challenge you, who didn't outshine you, who you could mold into whatever you needed her to be. You don't miss me. You miss control." The word hung in the air between them, stark and true. He flinched as if she had struck him. He had no response because he knew she was right. "I wish you well, Nathaniel," she said, walking to the door and opening it. "I truly hope you find what you're looking for. But it isn't here anymore." He stared at her for a long moment, seeing the absolute finality in her eyes. There was no anger, no bitterness, just a profound and peaceful closure. Defeated, he turned and walked out of her apartment and out of her life. As Izzy quietly closed the door, she didn't feel triumph or the satisfaction of revenge. She felt a deep, quiet sense of liberation. She was free. The weeks that followed were filled with a gentle, sunlit quality. Sebastian Quinn had called her the day after the gala. Their first date wasn't at a flashy restaurant, but a long walk through Central Park, followed by coffee at a small, unassuming cafe. They didn't talk about Nathaniel or her past. They talked about books, about the moral obligations of storytelling, about the places in the world that had shaped them. Their courtship unfolded like a well-written novel, slowly, with intention and mutual respect. Sebastian was a man who knew how to listen. He saw her not as a project or a reflection of himself, but as a brilliant, complex individual. He admired her mind, celebrated her successes, and understood her need for space and independence. It was a love built not on possession, but on partnership, not on drama, but on deep emotional clarity. One evening, sitting at Bemelman's bar, surrounded by the whimsical murals, he reached across the table and took her hand. "You know," he said, "I think the bravest story you'll ever champion is your own." In his eyes, she saw not adoration, but a profound and equal recognition. It felt like coming home. Her world expanded in other beautiful ways. Tariq's fashion line, launched with the momentum from the Sinclair Sapphire, became an overnight success. He was praised for his architectural elegance and his focus on making women feel powerful, rather than just decorated. Remembering how he had helped her find her voice, Izzy used her new influence and connections to help him secure a book deal of his own. A stunning coffee table book combining his designs with a memoir about his journey from a small town in Texas to the couture houses of Paris. Their friendship had become a creative symbiosis, each lifting the other higher. At Blackwood Press, Izzy's instincts were now treated as gospel. She was promoted to executive editor, given her own imprint to develop bold new voices. Dr. Lena Rosenthal's memoir, The Unmaking, debuted at #1 on the New York Times bestseller list. It became a cultural phenomenon, sparking book clubs and conversations across the country. Izzy's quiet act of courage at that editorial meeting had started a fire, just as Sebastian had predicted. The success culminated in a formal invitation for her to be a featured speaker at the prestigious PEN America Gala, an honor reserved for the literary world's most influential figures. The night of the PEN Gala arrived a year after the Hamilton Meyer event. Once again, Izzy found herself walking a red carpet. But this time, everything was different. She wasn't an accessory, a ghost, or a revelation. She was simply herself, fully and completely. She wore a deep emerald green gown, another Tariq creation that was elegant and understated. Sebastian was by her side, his presence a quiet, supportive warmth, not a possessive grip. She moved with an easy confidence, smiling for the cameras without artifice. She was no longer trying to prove anything to anyone. Her worth wasn't up for debate. It was a fact she carried within her. Her speech that night was about the power of second acts, about how the stories we tell ourselves are the most important ones we'll ever edit. As she was leaving, a young woman, a junior publicist, judging by her lanyard, stopped her, her eyes wide with earnest admiration. "Ms. Sinclair?" she said, her voice trembling slightly. I wanted to say thank you. I read about you, about everything. I just got out of a really bad relationship where I felt so small. Seeing you made me believe I could start again." Izzy looked at the young woman, and in her hopeful, nervous face, she saw a reflection of her former self. She placed a hand on her arm. "You can," Izzy said, her voice full of a warmth and conviction that came from a place of deep knowing. "Your story is just beginning." Walking out into the cool New York night, with Sebastian's hand in hers, Izzy looked up at the glittering skyline. She thought of Nathaniel and Vanessa, distant figures in a past that no longer had any power over her. She thought of the woman she used to be, huddled in her gray turtlenecks, believing the narrative of her own insignificance. She felt a profound sense of gratitude for the journey, for the pain that had carved out the space for so much joy. She had once been described as plain, a quiet, unassuming woman lost in the shadow of a powerful man. But as she stood there, a celebrated editor, a beloved friend, a woman deeply in love and deeply herself, she understood the truth. She was never plain. They were just blind. Isabel's story isn't just about a stunning gown or a dramatic entrance. It's a powerful reminder that our true value is never determined by who leaves us, but by who we decide to become in their absence. It shows that the most breathtaking transformation isn't about changing who you are, but finally having the courage to be seen for who you've been all along. Resilience isn't about revenge, it's about reclamation. Thank you so much for watching. If Izzy's journey resonated with you, please hit that like button and share this video with someone who might need to hear this message. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories about overcoming, becoming, and the incredible power of writing your own happy ending. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Tell us about a time you reclaimed your own story. Until next time, be your own revolution.